And welcome back. So I'm going to add this to the beginning of a video in which we're going to cover replacing the turn signal / puddle lights on this particular Ram. I've ordered some replacements from Amazon. Yes, they're not Mopar, but they're third-party generated, but they're getting pretty good reviews. I guess they're using newer LEDs, which are much brighter. But I thought it might be fun to kind of hook this passenger one up to a lab bench power supply. Because if you remember, when we were working with the lights on the truck, the passenger one was extremely dim, even though the driver's one was nice and bright. So what I'm doing right now is I've got the lab bench power supply set to a maximum of 1 amp and 12.5 volts. And what it looks like they're doing on this particular setup is that it's a 3-pin connector inside this light housing. And don't worry, in the later parts of the video, I'll cover how to get this lens assembly out. It's not as easy as it is on the newer Rams, but it can be done. But it looks like the center pin on these is a common negative. And they use one pin for the turn signal lights, and the other pin is used for the puddle lights as far as how it's being driven. Now, interesting enough, it looks like the turn signal lights on this one are nice and bright. It doesn't seem to be an issue. It looks like for one reason or another they're using 3 across the side, which would make sense because this is the turn signal part of it. So the curved part of it would be the part that people would see from the front of the truck as you're turning, on the bottom of the mirror. And they've got one kind of in the back here at an angle, which I thought was kind of interesting because these are your 2 puddle lights here, or what make up your puddle lights. And if we put that on top of there, you kind of end up with one of the turn signal bulbs kind of on the back half of the mirror. I guess they had a reason for it. It's just kind of interesting. But these seem to be working fine. And I thought you might want to see this. As we lower the voltage, you'll see they'll get dimmer. Eventually they'll turn off. Right about where they start to become just barely visible. It's right about there, right about 6 volts. It takes for them to kind of just, as you can see, hopefully see there in the camera, just start to display some light. So when we get the newer lights in and get them installed in the mirrors, we'll have to do some additional testing to see if the turn signal lights or the puddle lights in general just seem dim. So I'm going to come back up to the normal 12.5 volts here. There we go. And I'm going to move the positive side over and let you see what the old puddle lights look like. Just want to make sure I don't short. Power supply is protected from shorting. There we go. But you can see there, you can hopefully see that that's just barely lit, and that's as bright as that will go. So this LED is definitely either going bad, or it's accompanied resistor on this board here. You've got a couple of diodes on this circuit PCB. You've got a couple of resistors, that are in line with an LED, which normal LEDs are going to have resistors in line with them if they're not built into the LED. But you can see this should be nice and bright, and it's not. It's just barely lit. The other puddle light is right here, and hopefully you can see that. If I hold it up with the camera, maybe it'll focus in on it. You'll see a little dark spot on the very left hand side of this LED. It looks like this LED is actually burned out. So this one's barely lit. This one looks to be damaged. So these puddle lights needed to be replaced. So it'll be interesting to see, like I said, when we get them replaced and get the new ones in the housings, if the turn signal ones still end up being dim. If they do, then we know what we need to start troubleshooting next. And like I said, it is a 3-wire connector. that comes in the bottom of this. As we were talking about, center pin looks to be a common ground, and then just positive and negative on the left and right hand side, vary on the far left or far right hand pin, depending on whether it's a turn signal or puddle light. So with that being said, the next part of the video that you'll see is that we'll get the newer lights installed. This is just the cover for the older light, but we'll see about getting the newer lights installed when they arrive in, and then we'll get them installed in the truck and do a very similar test and see if that fixes our problem. But with that being said, I'll let you go, and I'll bring you back in a minute. Well, it'll be a moment for you, but a couple of days for me. Talk to you in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. If you remember, in the previous clip, we were just experimenting with a power supply and lighting up the old puddle light / turn signal lens or light setup that was on the rear view mirror of the passenger side. And we verified that although the turn signals looked nice and bright and good, the puddle lamps, only this one was working, barely any intensity, and this one actually looks to be burnt out. You can see like a little burn mark on the LED there. So I went out to the Amazon and found these. Now they're the generic ones, they're not OEM, which I'm fine with. Let's see here. Yep. These are the replacements. And as you can see, they look almost identical to the original ones. So these newer ones, supposedly per the description, have newer, brighter sets of LEDs in them, so on and so forth. And apparently it's fairly common for these to actually go out to the tune that there are several manufacturers and individuals selling these replacement lights on Amazon. I just went ahead and got these because they match the OEM ones pretty well. But you can also get several aftermarket ones where this is all black and they got a solid strip of LEDs up front, and on the bottom they got some really nice sharp looking ones out there. Not that there's anything wrong with these, but again, I was just going for as much of the original look as I could get. Now, I looked up online how to remove this from the housing that you see here. And just like the online suggested, on this Ram, when you tilt up the passenger mirror, and when we do this on the driver's side, I'll bring you along and try to show you this a bit better. The light clips in place via a groove here, but also there is a Phillips screw right here on this one. Now, when I looked at this online, there's other models of Rams that is only held in by a tab here, but again, in this case, don't let that deceive you, because that was a nice coarse grade Phillips screw that sits inside this channel here, comes in through a hole in the bottom, and ends up threading into that hole that you see there. So it's held in place by this clip here and that hole there. And just to show you on the original, you can see where it's just threading in the plastic, and that's, well, trying to get the display back on the GoPro. Okay. There we go. So you can see on the original here that that screw is just coarse thread enough, it just threads in the plastic. So what I'm going to do to save a little grief ahead of time is to take that mounting screw, go ahead and thread it into here and thread it out. That way the threads are there, and then we can reattach our electrical, snap this lens back in place, and then when it comes time to put that Phillips screw in, what you kind of have to do is, like I said, drop the Phillips screw in ahead of time, in through the opening where you got it. Set it down inside the mounting hole that it would be in, which in this case is over here. You can see it there on the end. and then you can reach in with a really, really thin, and I did it with a small flat blade screwdriver, push the mirror forward. So in other words, push the mirror up so that it'll tilt up as far as you can, giving you a gap between the bottom of the mirror and the plastic, and then you can kind of get down in here to get to that Phillips fastener and tighten that back up. And another thing to note is you'll see this lip here on this light. This is the one that goes on the passenger side, so it'll go in here like this. This lip goes underneath this plastic trim, so keep that in mind. Like I said, it's you kind of have to finagle it to get it in and out, but you can without having to take all this trim off. And it looks like, and I've seen other individuals do this, it looks like you could also do this with the mirror still installed onto the truck. Since we were doing work on the driver's door as well, troubleshooting our light issue, I went ahead and just took the mirror off the truck because it's easier to deal with here on the bench. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do exactly as I described to you, and we'll see about getting this lens back in here, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. So before I go to put this lens in, I'm sure I'm going to have people screaming at the screen already. I am going to test this with the bench power supply. So we've got our bench power supply here. I'm just hooking up negative to the center pin. And remember, when we tested this on the bench, the old OEM unit was negative to the center pin of the 3, and then positive on the either one of the two outside for either the turn signal or the puddle light. And what I'm using to get down in here and to touch these pins without shorting anything is I've got the negative lead already alligator clipped on, but because the space is tight, if you've ever seen anyone do this before, I'm just using a long, thin, flat screwdriver. Got the negative lead clipped onto that. And just to show you here, you can see there's our turn signal. It might be a bit dim, don't worry. As you can see, it's significant. It actually is brighter than the original. But I've got the current turned way down on the laptop power, on the bench power supply, just in case there's an issue. Show you that one more time. So that's the turn signals, and the other pin should be the puddles. And you can see how much of a difference that is alone, and you're not even looking at it directly compared to what the broken one, where that one just barely lit LED was at. That's the other nice thing about these newer setups that you buy them online, is that they're using newer, much more brighter and efficient LEDs that use, you know, the same power as the old ones did. They're just, again, as technology gets better, things improve. So I'm gonna work on getting this in, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our replacement light in here to include that tricky little mounting screw, again, that's on the inside. And I'll show you this on the driver's one because it'll be easier to see it from start to finish. But I found the easiest thing to do to get these lights to go back in, because again, you've got a piece of it that sits behind this corner trim, and you've got that front lip that sits in here, so it makes it kind of awkward. But I found it easier to obviously hook up your electrical connection. Get this back corner in kind of at an angle first, and then as you're pushing this down, work this forward so this goes up underneath the lip of this plastic, and eventually you'll end up, at least I did on this one, and we'll see if the driver's one does the same thing. We're on this corner, and what you can do is just take yourself a piece of plastic trim tool, gently get under the lip of this plastic, and can kind of pry this away a little bit on the edge, and then eventually you can get this corner to snap down in place, and that'll cinch it. It's kind of hard for me to show you, but I did verify that plastic tab right here that's on the replacements did fall in place of the groove, and you can easily see that if you tilt the mirror up like this, and it gives you a little bit of gap that you can kind of get down in there with a flashlight and verify that everything is kind of clipped and fell into place. But I'll bring it back when we get ready to do the driver's side, and you can see a little bit more about what I mean in detail. And other than that, I'll bring you back in a bit. Thank you much. Bye. And welcome back. So we got our passenger mirror reinstalled after replacing the light assembly. We just covered a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and remove the driver's side mirror, bring it inside, and go ahead and get the light changed out as well. So on these mirrors, there's two plugs, at least on this particular model. Remember when we were diagnosing the door module earlier, so we got C1 and C2, and that disconnects electrically our mirror from the door. And then we're also attached to this reinforcement kind of piece of plastic here. It's not a reinforcement, it's just kind of structural to hold the wiring loom in place. And you can see the electrical tape was pretty old, so I was able to just slide it off. And you know, we'll put some fresh tape on that when we go to reassemble it. But what you want to do is you've got 3 10mm bolts. Now on the passenger one, and I think the driver's one's the same way, the inside of the lens up here is a clip. So when you undo these 3 bolts, that clip should hold it, but be mindful that when you take these off, just kind of take your free hand or somehow hold. You want to make sure you support this mirror, is I guess what I'm saying, when you go to take these bolts loose, because you definitely don't want that thing dropping and breaking, because depending on the options and the accessories you have in that rear view mirror, it could be pretty pricey to replace. So I usually like to start just by cracking these loose. They're not very tight. And go ahead and take the one here in the corner out, or at least that's what I usually like to do. Go ahead and just put them back here in the driver floorboard. Go ahead and take this one loose. Now remember, we still got one bolt in here holding this. I'm not going to take it out all the way. I'm just going to loosen it. So in case that mirror decides to go, it's got something to help retain it. And generally, there we go. I think we got it broken free. So now what I'll normally do is go on the other side of the truck again, reach in from the outside, grab this bolt, undo it all the way, and then take the rest of the mirror. So let me get this mirror off and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. So you can see we got a mirror off, and just to help safeguard, because we're getting rain showers off and on today, I just sealed it up with some Kapton tape. Just to help keep the rain out of it until we can get the mirror back in place, because obviously as you have this thing out, you've got several holes that go straight into the cab. Last thing you want to do is come out, open up your driver's door, and empty out a swimming pool. So let me get you in the garage here and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. Again, welcome back. It's going to be a bit hard for me to get you in here to see this, but hopefully you can see that if I get enough light down in there, that the Phillips screw that holds this light in is actually missing on the driver's side. So somebody's been in here before. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to show you a good shot. Of that pin. Oh, you might be able to see that pin in there now. See that little plastic pin right down there, right where their wiring harness is. You'll see that little plastic tab that sticks up. It locks the the whole fixture, the lower light fixture, in place. Let's see here. There you go. There you go. There you go. That's a good shot of it. So you see that little plastic tab right there. That's, again, you'll see the wiring harness right above it. What you can do is you can take like I did, just what we used was a plastic trim removal tool to get in between the lens here and this trim to push that tab back to then pry this light out. Again, if you take this lens or this mirror and push it all the way forward, it'll give you that gap that you see there between the bottom and this trim piece to allow you to get in there and push that tab back. Normally there would be a screw right, at least on this model, right there. Hopefully you can see that. You can see that screw, you see you can see, if you look up in the kind of the upper left hand corner, there's like a Torx bit. and then below that it looks like an empty screw hole. There should be that same Phillips type bit that was on the passenger side. So that tells me somebody was in here before and probably has replaced this LED assembly and just didn't put the screw back in. I mean, which is fine because, to be honest with you, just as we saw on the passenger side, that tab, as well as the two areas, the lip here and the lip on the side that get held in place by the trim, is enough to kind of secure these fixtures, in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a trim tool in there and push that tab backwards, and I'm going to work on prying this light out. And kind of the best way I found to do it is to, again, push that tab backwards, start with this rear corner, get like a trim removal tool. Let's just get the light situated a bit better here. There we go. Kind of just take the light like this, and as you're pushing this pin back that's on the inside here, try to get underneath the lip on this back edge and just start prying upwards until you can get a bite into it, and then you can pull this light the rest of the way out. It does take a little finagling. You're gonna have to fight with it a little bit, and I'll see if I can get you on the tripod to kind of show you what I'm talking about, but you can get these out. Just stand by one quick moment and we'll get you on the tripod, and hopefully I'll show you kind of what I'm talking about. One moment. And welcome back. So I'm going to try my best to kind of show you. I can't get the camera angle in there to show you me depressing this pin because the space is just too tight. But you can see that we've got our mirror pushed as far back as we can. We've got a nice gap in between here. And then what I'm going to do, yes, I'm taking advantage that my bench power supply has a metal case on it just so I can get some light down in here. And I'm going to go ahead and push this pin backwards. Once I find it, there it is. Need something a bit straighter. That's got too much of a curve to it. Need something a little bit longer. There we go. So what you can do is just get on that pin like we've done there. I'm just keeping pressure on that pin to keep it pushed backwards. And then take this light, now that we know where a pin's at. So this is where it gets interesting. You kind of just have to find the best spot that's going to work for you. Trying to keep this into the camera is making this a bit tricky. Now I'm sure there's a way to take the mirror out of here and disassemble the entire assembly and so on and so forth, and that's great. And if I had instructions to do that, I would. But you can see that I've got this pin pushed back and I'm down here in this corner, and I'm using just a small flat screwdriver because I need something rather rigid. Now remember, we have replacement lights, so I don't care if I necessarily crack this light or break the lens taking it out. So keep that in mind. If this is something that you want to put back in, you just want to verify its operation. Just be careful when you're prying it out of here. And you're going to hear some sounds you're probably not going to like, because you're going to hear some plastic breaking on you. On the newer Rams, from what I've seen online, this isn't as much of an issue. It's a bit easier to get these out. Even easier on the newer ones, where your puddle light just is kind of a round disc that sits here, and your turn signal is something very similar. It's not all one big piece like this assembly is. See, that's the key of this, as you can see, is just trying to get underneath the lip of this. Nope, sorry, I hit you. Trying to get underneath the lip of this and get this started to give. See, I'm just gonna let that pin alone for a minute because I need my other hand. There we go. See, okay, so we've got a good angle right here to get underneath the corner of this light. Now, one thing you can also do, I forgot to mention this, is if your fingers are skinny enough, if getting a hold of the edge of that light is giving you too much of a fit, you can kind of push back on here, and if you can get your fingers in here, you can kind of loop them around this edge right here and put some pressure on the other side of that, but I just don't have enough room in there to get it on this one. Because like I said, it's not just the pin on this one that you're fighting. It's the fact that it overlaps in this corner back here and it overlaps on this front edge. So what we can try next, and like I said, this is kind of the less glamorous part of this. I'm sure there's probably some people screaming at the screen right now that know exactly how to, an alternate way to take this apart. There we go. You can see that the plastic on this, which I didn't even actually break, you can see that the clear plastic on this is actually separating from the back reflective piece. And that's my understanding on these. Now that we've got something wedged in there, we've got a little gap. Hold on, let's get that back in place. There we go. Now that we've got ourselves a gap, we can get in there with another tool. But my understanding on this one is that this unfortunately is common for this style of turn signal / puddle lamp, is that they'll age, they'll eventually get water in them, and they'll stop working. It's because water and electronics do not mix. There we go. Got a little bit. I broke some of the reflector off there. This is, like I said, you're seeing a struggle here because it is a little bit of a struggle, but it's more of a struggle because I'm trying to keep everything in shot of the camera. Let me just see if I can get the clear lens off of here. There we go. You can see that's glued in place. Again, it's kind of a destructive way of doing it, but we know that we're not putting this particular light back on here. This actually looks to be like a newer style one too. Yeah, this is the replacement. This doesn't look like a factory one. Explains why that screw is missing. Somebody's been in here before, but you can see I can now grab this edge of it now that it's out, manipulate it. Now that you've got this corner up, and like I said, it was the destructive way of doing it. I'm not gonna argue it wasn't. We can now push this pin back in here, and it looks like it's free. Nope, need to go back a little bit. It's still caught up on this pin. There we go. Okay, so with that final pop there, we're out. I'm sorry I hit you again. Like I said, it's just, this is cumbersome. It's the only way to it. This light is awkward to deal with, especially when you're trying to film this on a tripod. But there's a tab here, just like any electrical connector, Just push up on the tab, and let's get this out of here. So let's see what we can see here. I don't see a Mopar symbol on it, so this definitely looks like this is an aftermarket replacement. That's where that screw should have been, but they didn't put it back in when they put the new light back in. And what we can do on this one, in case you're curious, and you haven't completely clicked off of this video yet, let's get our bench power supply going. And these replacements, if I didn't mention it before, they are at least listed on the unit as being 12 volts at 5 watts. Okay, let's get our long skinny screwdriver back in here that we used last time. Let's just test the old one. Now the old one, when it was on the truck, was working okay. And the reason why I'm replacing it is because I want them both to be the same type and replaced at the same time. Plus I'm seeing a little bit of corrosion on this pin here. Let's make sure that we are actually on voltage here. Okay, 12.5 volts. You can see there's our backups. So the puddle lights are here and here, and the turn signal lights, there's 4 of them, 3 across here and 1 in the middle. They've got this encased, and it looks to be, feels like just hot glue. Like their attempt at weather pack. You can see that there. Okay, let me try the other pin. You can see that there. So you can see you've got, looks like one of the turn signal lights is actually out on this one. So you've got 3 there, and then that one there should have also been a turn signal as well. So let's get our replacement in here. Same as our passenger side. You can see there's your 2 puddles. The other pin should be our turn signals. You can see that we got 3 across the front, and you got 1 in the center there. So cool. Verified that our new part works, and we can work on getting this reassembled into our lens. I'm going to hit the connector on the inside of the rearview mirror housing that goes into that with a little bit of contact cleaner, just because there was a little bit of corrosion on one of these side pins on the old one, and I don't want to reassemble this by taking a yeah, you can see it. You can see the green crusties on that far pin right there. So I'm going to shoot a little contact cleaner on this just to take care of that, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. Okay, welcome back. So again, just used a little contact cleaner, a little bit of compressed air, small piece of wire and just kind of cleaned up that far pin that was having the green crusties on it. So once again, we got a light. I'm going to go ahead and make that electrical connection. There we go. Okay, so we got our connector on there. Now, what I found kind of easier to do in the past, even on the passenger one, was you see this, it's got a lip right here, and of course it's got the lip that we mentioned on the front, and it's got this tang, which this is what we were pushing backwards on to get it out of this groove to get this to release. And of course we're not going to worry about the Phillips screw here because whoever was in here last also did not put it in, but I found it easier to just kind of take the corner of that and seat that, and then you can take this piece and start to line it up with this groove here to get it to fall into place. And then once that starts, okay, let's do this. Let's get this lower corner in here started first. Let's try it this way. This one's being a bit more finicky. Can I push that pin? Okay, so I just reached in around behind this with my fingers and just kind of pushed the pin into that groove to get it started. Oop, and you can see it just came out. Okay, let's try this from the front, since, like I said, so you can see putting this in and kind of taking this out, at least on this model, is a bit of a pain in the rear. Okay, let's push. Let me get some light in on this so I can see. Reach in here with a trim removal tool and just push that pin forward. There we go. So that fell forward. That's starting to, hopefully you can see that pin in there is in the groove and starting to go towards home. So we've got that in. We've got this rear corner tab in. And then what we can do is then just start to kind of take and push this around this edge, this outer edge on this side. Get you a shot of that. And just kind of start to try to push this in place. Now you're only going to be able to get so far, and what you're going to be fighting is this edge here. And what I've done with this in the past is just gotten something underneath this lip to get it started, and you can just kind of work your way around. You can see how you got some slack in this trim. You can pull it away a pretty good amount. You may even be able to kind of get your fingernails in here like this and just kind of pull against it, pull it away as best you can. And as you pull this away and make a gap, then push down on that corner of the light at the same time. There we go. So we can see we got this corner almost in place. There we go. There we go. Okay. So then what you have to do again is just kind of keep taking this trim tool or whichever tool you're using and work it around, getting the rest of this to kind of snap into place. And then when you finally get it all lined up, generally what will happen is that this final corner will kind of pop in. But as you can see, it may take some fidgeting with it to get it to go. And if you know how to get this lens out of here without damaging it, you know, the more power to you. By all means, take the lens out and do this, because it would make this a far, far easier job. There we go. Okay, I think that got it. Yep, that got it. That popped in that final bit of corner. So you can kind of see how we, hopefully see how we did that. We started with getting this back corner kind of in place, reached in behind it, pushed that plastic pin so it started to fall into the gap it would lock in, and then got this corner close, used this one, pulled this plastic forward until this corner started, and then just kind of kept pulling this plastic forward as we're pushing down on this light to get it all to snap in. Hopefully you can see that there. All that is now nice and snapped in place. Yep, okay, yep, that's in that slip. That corner piece is in. Okay, this piece is in. Yeah, like I said, it probably wasn't the most entertaining video, but in case you got to tackle that job, just to show you that it can be done. There's probably, I'm sure there's easier ways to do it than what I showed, but on the newer Rams, like I said, instead of this being a whole assembly like turn signal and puddle lights, the puddle lights are on a separate piece that easily pops out the bottom, and the turn signal is the same way. So they've made improvements on this in the later years. But if you got an earlier one and you need to do the same job, again, as you saw, it can be done. You're just gonna have to fidget with it for a little bit. So I'm gonna bring you back out to the truck. We're gonna get this mirror installed and consider it done. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we're starting to put our mirror back in. We've got our wiring pushed back through. And remember, this top one on the outside is also a clip. It's a metal clip on the mirror, much like a piece of plastic trim clip. Kind of looks like this. And if you, as long as it isn't broken, that will snap in, and you'll see it'll kind of hold the mirror in there for you. And then all you got to do is just put your bolts back in. But again, just be mindful of the clip. It's there, and it's there to support it, but you just want to make sure that that mirror doesn't fall. And of course, once you've got one of these in, got a couple threads on it, then you're good. So you're just dealing with these 3 bolts here, and of course this far corner, which is again a clip. And it's the same way even on the passenger side. So click, click, click. Doesn't take much, just hand tight seems to be enough. There we go. Let's back on that. And then we can take our wiring. Remember, pins 1 and pin 2 were our connectors. It's pin 2. This is number 1. There we go. And if you get if you get confused about where this is at, a good rule of thumb is just to take a picture of this before you disconnect it. If you forget which one is lined up, you can, if you haven't done the opposite door yet, then you can just look at the passenger door, because the passenger and the driver's door are the same between the two. You've got on this one, the 2-pin connector is connector 1, and the remainder of the wiring for the rear view mirror goes into connector C2. And if you've taken them both apart and you can't remember where they go, I do believe they are also keyed, or they will only go in a particular order. Yeah, because that one is keyed differently. See, it looks like they got the same number of pins. Let's just try it. Yeah, you can see that the grooves in the connector won't even let you line up. So you good on the engineer's part. They've done them in such a way you're not going to get them mixed up. All right, perfect. So that's in there. Mirrors back in there. Turn signal / puddle lights have been officially replaced. And with that, I will call this one a video at this point. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing. We'd be much appreciative. Again, trying to just working on continuing to grow the channel to allow us to do even bigger and better builds in the future. So if you haven't already done so, please consider doing so. And with that, I thank you, and I will let you go. We'll call this one a video, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye. Oh, and I'm sorry, there'll be a link in the description to the particular replacement lights that I'm using on this RAM. Talk to you a bit, or talk to you later. Bye.